Part 2. The Face Behind the Legend. Valara Prime had not seen a celebration like this in a generation. The crystal towers of the capital city were lit with soft blue and gold light, and the streets were lined with Valaran citizens who wanted to catch a glimpse of the human war hero who had helped save their civilization. Banners hung from every bridge and balcony. Children carried small flags bearing both the Valaran crest and the emblem of Earth's United Territorial Command. Aelith oversaw every detail of the ceremony with careful precision. She coordinated with human liaison officers, reviewed security arrangements, and studied the limited file that had been declassified about Grey Wolf. The file was frustratingly thin. It contained battle records, commendations, mission summaries, and nothing personal. His real name was blacked out. Human Military Command had kept his identity hidden throughout the entire war, and they were not about to reveal it now without his permission. Aelith found this strange, but respected it. Humans were odd about their heroes. They built them up and shielded them at the same time. She supposed it was one of the things that made them different from the Valaran, who displayed their champions like jewels in a crown. She did notice something interesting in the tactical reports. Grey Wolf's strategies were unusual. He did not fight the way human commanders were trained to fight. His ground operations showed an understanding of alien environments that went beyond military briefings. He seemed to know how non-human ecosystems worked, how alien terrain could be used for cover and advantage. It was as if he had spent time living in alien places, studying them up close. She filed the thought away and moved on. The day of the arrival came. A human frigate called the Steadfast docked at the orbital station above Valara Prime. The ceremonial hall in the palace was filled to capacity. It was a massive space carved from pale crystal, and the light inside it shifted through shades of violet and blue like a living thing. Emperor Korath stood at the center of the raised platform in his formal robes. Aelith stood beside him, dressed in white and silver, her white hair braided with tiny glowing stones. Hundreds of Valaran dignitaries, military officers, and diplomats filled the hall. The air hummed with quiet telepathic conversation. The human delegation entered first. Officers in crisp dress uniforms, diplomats in dark suits, a small security team that moved with trained precision. They were polite and clearly impressed by the architecture. Several of them looked up at the crystal ceiling with open awe. Then the hall fell silent. The last figure stepped through the entrance. He was tall and lean. His dark military dress uniform was simple, with fewer decorations than he was entitled to wear. His hair was dark, cut short, with streaks of gray at the temples that made him look older than he probably was. There was a scar along his jaw, thin and pale, and another across his left hand. He walked with a steady, unhurried confidence. Not proud, not showing off, just a man who knew exactly who he was and did not need anyone else to confirm it. He was introduced formally by the human ambassador, Commander Cole Hartley, United Territorial Command, call sign Grey Wolf. Aelith felt the world stop. Her breath caught in her chest. Her hands went cold. Her telepathic shield slammed shut, so hard and so fast that 3 Valaran courtiers standing nearby winced and pressed their fingers to their temples. Her father glanced at her with a slight frown. She forced herself to breathe. She forced her face into the calm, neutral expression she had been trained to wear since childhood. But inside, she was falling. It was Cole. It was her Cole, the quiet mechanic from Oregon, the man who fixed boats and cooked dinner and laughed at her questions about engines, the man she had left sleeping in a dark apartment without a word of goodbye. He was not a mechanic anymore. He was the most celebrated warrior in the galaxy. Cole did not recognize her. She looked nothing like the woman he had known. On Earth she had been Lena, dark-haired, brown-eyed, human in every visible way. Now she stood before him in her true form, silver skin, white hair, violet eyes that glowed faintly in the shifting light of the crystal hall. She was beautiful, but she was alien. There was no reason for him to look at her and see the woman he had lost. Emperor Korath delivered a speech that honored the bravery and sacrifice of the human forces. He spoke of the alliance that had formed in fire and blood, and of the debt the Valeran people owed to those who had come to their aid when no one else would. Then Cole was called forward to receive the Star of Valara, the highest military honor in the Dominion. He stepped up to the platform, accepted the medal from the Emperor's hands, and turned to face the assembled crowd. He gave a short speech. It was simple and direct, spoken in a low, steady voice that carried through the hall without effort. He did not talk about victories. He did not talk about strategy or bravery or glory. He talked about the people he had lost. He named soldiers who had died under his command, human and Valeran alike. He spoke about the civilians he had seen suffering on burning colony worlds. He said he had not fought for honor or recognition. He had fought because people were dying, and he had the ability to help, and that was enough of a reason. When he finished, the hall was silent for a long moment before the applause began. Aelith barely heard any of it. She was watching his eyes. Those same gray eyes she had memorized in another life. They were the same, and they were different. The warmth was still there, buried deep, like embers under ash. But there were layers over it now. Pain, weariness, the heavy knowledge of a man who had seen the worst the universe had to offer and kept going anyway. She wondered what had happened to the soft, gentle man who used to sing off-key while washing dishes. She wondered how much of that man was left inside the soldier standing before her. After the ceremony, there was a formal reception. Food, music, conversation, the careful rituals of diplomacy that followed every great event. Aelith was expected to speak personally with the guest of honor. It was her duty as the princess overseeing the occasion. She approached him. A Valeran herald made the formal introduction. Princess Aelith Sorvani, daughter of Emperor Korath, heir to the Dominion. Commander Cole Hartley, hero of the Alliance. Cole extended his hand, a human custom. The Valeran found it charmingly physical, this need to touch when meeting someone new. Aelith took his hand. His grip was firm but careful, like he was aware of his own strength, and did not want to use too much of it. Something flickered in his expression, a tiny shift, barely visible. His head tilted slightly to one side, the way a person does when they hear a familiar sound they cannot quite place. His eyes stayed on hers for half a second longer than politeness required. Then it was gone. He smiled, a polite, tired smile, and thanked her for the honor. He asked about Valara Prime. He complimented the architecture. He was gracious and professional, and gave no sign that anything unusual had happened. Aelith answered his questions. She smiled. She played her part, and as soon as protocol allowed, she excused herself. She walked to her private chambers. She closed the door. She sat down in the dark, and she pressed her hands together to stop them from shaking. Cole Hartley, Grey Wolf, the man who had saved her people, the legend that the entire galaxy was talking about. He was the man she had loved and abandoned on a rainy coast 10 years ago. And now she had to decide what to do about it. She could say nothing. She could let him receive his honors, sign the treaty, and return to human space. He would never know. The secret would stay buried. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice her advisors would demand if they knew the truth. Or she could tell him. She could tell him that the alien princess who shook his hand tonight was the same woman who used to fall asleep with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, thinking it was the most beautiful sound in the universe. But if she told him, she would also have to face what she had done to him. She would have to look into those gray eyes and explain why she disappeared, why she left him with nothing, why she chose duty over love and never looked back. And there was a question underneath all of that, a question she was afraid to answer. What had her disappearance done to him? The gentle mechanic she had known was gone. In his place stood a warrior, hard and scarred and haunted. He had told the crowd that he fought because people were dying. But Aelith knew people. She knew what drove them to walk into fire again and again. It was not duty alone. It was the need to matter. It was the desperate search for meaning when the thing that gave your life meaning was taken away. Had she done this to him? Had her vanishing broken something in Cole Hartley that could only be filled by war? Aelith sat in the dark for a very long time. The flowers in the garden outside her window bloomed silver in the moonlight, the color of grief. Part 3. Cracks in the Mask. The days that followed were filled with meetings, diplomatic dinners, and cultural exchanges. The Valeran and human delegations were working to turn the wartime alliance into a permanent treaty, and Cole, as the face of humanity's military contribution, was expected to be present for much of it. He would remain on Valara Prime for 2 weeks. Aelith, as the princess in charge of the event, could not avoid him, even if she wanted to. She tried to keep her distance. She was polite and professional in every interaction. She smiled when she was supposed to smile, and spoke when she was supposed to speak, and never let her composure slip, not once. Not even when Cole stood close enough for her to catch a familiar scent that brought back memories so sharp they nearly cut her open. But she could not stop watching him. She watched him during meals, sitting among Valeran officers who towered over him, speaking quietly, listening carefully, treating every person at the table as if their words mattered. She watched him walking through the crystal gardens in the early morning, stopping to examine the alien plants with genuine curiosity, touching the glowing petals with the same careful hands that used to take apart boat engines. She watched him notice small things, a servant struggling to carry a heavy tray, a young Valeran officer standing alone at the edge of a gathering, and quietly moved to help, without drawing attention to himself. The soldier had not killed the man she knew. Cole was still in there, buried under years of war and loss, but alive. There were new things, too. A hardness in his jaw whenever someone mentioned the battles he had won. A distance in his eyes when people praised him as a hero. He did not sleep well. Palace security reported that he walked the halls at night, alone, standing at the tall windows and staring out at the alien stars. He carried the war the way some people carry old injuries, always present, always aching, never fully healed. Cole, for his part, could not shake the feeling that the princess was familiar. He could not explain it. She was alien, silver-skinned, white-haired, with eyes that glowed violet in certain light. She looked nothing like anyone he had ever known, and yet something about her presence tugged at a place deep inside his chest. The way she tilted her head when she listened, the way she paused before she spoke, as if she was choosing her words with care, the way she looked at him sometimes, when she thought he was not paying attention, with an expression that was too heavy to be mere diplomatic interest. He told himself it was nothing. He was tired. The war was over, and his mind was playing tricks on him, looking for connections that did not exist. She was a princess. He was a soldier from a small planet. The idea that she reminded him of anyone was ridiculous. But the feeling would not go away. The turning point came on the 6th day. Aelith was showing Cole a memorial garden that had been built to honor the Valeran soldiers who died in the war. It was a beautiful, quiet place, filled with bioluminescent flowers that responded to the emotions of the people around them. blue for calm, red for anger, silver for grief. The garden was alive in a way that nothing on earth could match, breathing softly with light that shifted and flowed like water. They walked together along a winding path between tall, glowing blossoms. Aelith explained the garden's history, the names of the flowers, the way Valeran culture used gardens as places of memory and healing. Cole listened with quiet respect. Then, he noticed the flowers near Aelith. They were changing, slowly, without her seeming to realize it. The blossoms closest to her were shifting from their natural blue to a deep, aching silver. Not the gentle silver of mild sadness, but the dark, bruised silver of old grief. Grief that had been carried for a long time. Grief that had become part of the person carrying it. He asked her, carefully, if she had lost someone in the war. Aelith stopped walking. She looked at the flowers around her and realized what they were showing. For a moment, her composure flickered. Then she said, quietly, that she had lost someone before the war. Someone she never got to say goodbye to. Cole was silent for a few seconds. Then he said he understood. He said he had lost someone too, a long time ago. A woman he loved, who disappeared one night without a word. He said he spent years trying to find her. He said he never did. The flowers around both of them turned the same deep, heartbroken silver. Neither of them spoke for a while. They walked back toward the palace in silence, side by side, and the garden glowed dark behind them, like a bruise on the land. After that day, something shifted between them. Their conversations became longer, more personal. The careful wall of diplomacy began to develop cracks, and through those cracks, real words started to pass. Cole began to talk about the war. Not the battles or the strategies, but the cost. He told Aelith about the soldiers he had lost, young men and women who had trusted him and died following his orders. He told her about the Valeran children he had carried out of a burning colony on Nithara, how they had clung to his neck and screamed in a language he did not understand, and how their faces still visited him at night. He told her about the silence after a battle, when the shooting stopped, and the only sound was the wind and the distant crying of the wounded, and how that silence was worse than any weapon he had ever faced. Aelith listened the way she had always listened, fully, without judgment, with a presence that made the person speaking feel like they were the only one in the room. Cole had not felt that in years. He had not felt truly heard since the last time he sat in a small kitchen in Oregon and talked to a dark-haired woman who asked too many questions and never seemed to get tired of his answers. Aelith, in turn, began to share pieces of herself. She spoke about the weight of being a princess in a dying empire, about the loneliness of telepathy, of hearing the thoughts of hundreds of people around you, and knowing that most of those thoughts were political calculations, about the guilt of overseeing a war she could not fight in, of reading casualty lists every morning and feeling each name like a stone placed on her chest. She did not tell him her secret, but she came closer with every conversation. Cole's second-in-command noticed. Lieutenant Nora Beckett was a sharp, practical woman who had been with Cole since the early campaigns. She had pulled him out of a burning dropship on Nithara. She had watched him lead impossible missions and come back alive when no one else could. She respected him more than anyone she had ever served with, and she was fiercely protective of him. She told him to be careful. An alien princess and a human commander getting close could become a political disaster. Cole nodded and said he understood, but he did not step back. The Valeran court noticed too. Telepathic whispers spread through the palace like wind through leaves. An alien, a human, spending so much time with the princess. Some courtiers were curious, others were offended. Lord Cyrath, Aelith's chief advisor and a cold, ambitious political operator, warned her privately that any attachment to the human could be seen as a weakness. It could harm the treaty. It could undermine her position as heir. Aelith told him she was simply doing her diplomatic duty. Cyreth did not believe her, and they both knew it. The crack became a break on the 9th night. A small private dinner had been arranged as part of the diplomatic schedule. Just Aelith, Cole, and a handful of attendants who stood at a respectful distance. The food was Valeran, delicate and strange, served on crystal plates that glowed faintly in the low light. Cole ate politely and asked questions about each dish. Aelith answered and found herself smiling more than she had in months. The conversation drifted to life before the war. Cole spoke about growing up near the Oregon coast, about the smell of salt and motor oil, about his father's workshop and the sound of rain on a tin roof, about a year that had changed his life. He said he once met a woman who made him believe the universe was bigger and kinder than he had thought. He said she appeared in his life like a gift, and then one night she was gone. No note, no explanation, no trace. He said he searched for her for 2 years and never found a single clue. He said he joined the military after that because he needed a purpose. He needed a reason to get out of bed in the morning. He needed something to fill the space she had left behind. Aelith sat perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her telepathic shields were locked so tight that her head ached. Her violet eyes were bright, and she was grateful for the low light that hid the tears she refused to let fall. She said, her voice very steady, that she was sorry for whoever that woman was. She said that perhaps the woman had reasons she could not explain. Perhaps leaving had not been a choice. Perhaps she had not wanted to go. Cole looked at her. That flicker again, that tilt of his head, that half-second pause where something behind his eyes tried to reach a connection his mind could not make. He said, "You remind me of her." The words landed in Aelith's chest like a blade made of light. She excused herself shortly after. She walked to her chambers with measured, steady steps. She closed the door. She pressed her back against it and slid to the floor. She could not do this anymore. She could not sit across from the man she loved and pretend to be a stranger. She could not listen to him describe the worst years of his life and know that she was the cause. She could not watch him search her face for a ghost and say nothing. The truth was going to come out. It had to. Not because it was smart or safe or politically wise, but because Cole Hartley had bled for her people, and he deserved better than a lie. She just had to find the courage to give it to him. Part 4. The Truth Unveiled. Aelith did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling of her chamber, where tiny points of light embedded in the crystal mimicked the stars outside. Her mind turned the same question over and over, like a stone in a river. Tell him. Do not tell him. Tell him. Do not tell him. By the time the first pale light of the Valeran dawn crept through her window, she had made her decision. She was going to tell him the truth. Not because it was the wise thing to do, not because her advisors would approve, but because Cole had earned it. He had walked into a war that was not his, bled for a species that was not his, and saved a world that had never given him anything. He had done all of this while carrying a wound that she had put in his chest 10 years ago. He deserved to know who had hurt him, and he deserved to hear it from her own mouth. She sent a private message to Cole that morning, requesting a meeting in the memorial garden, away from the court, away from the diplomats and the cameras and the endless political noise. Just the two of them. Cole agreed. When he arrived at the garden entrance, he could tell something was different. Aelith was not wearing her formal robes. She wore a simple white dress, and her white hair hung loose around her shoulders, instead of being braided in the elaborate court style. Her expression was open and raw in a way he had not seen before. She looked, he thought, like someone about to jump off a cliff. They walked into the garden together. The bioluminescent flowers shifted around them, responding to the tension in the air. Blues and silvers and uncertain greens. Aelith started by asking him about the woman he had lost. She asked for details he had not shared before. The name she used, the place they lived, the small things he remembered. Cole was quiet for a moment. He looked at her with those gray eyes, searching, uncertain. Then he spoke. He told her the woman's name was Lena. He told her they lived in a small apartment above a boat repair shop on the Oregon coast. He told her she used to sit on the kitchen counter while he cooked. He told her she loved the rain and the stars, and asked more questions than anyone he had ever met. He told her she smiled like the world was a wonderful secret that only she understood. He told her she disappeared on a night in October, and he woke up alone in a cold bed, and the apartment was empty, and she was gone, like she had never existed at all. Aelith listened to every word without moving. The flowers around her were dark violet, almost black, the color of grief so deep it had no bottom. Then she spoke. She told him something that no one outside the Valerian Intelligence Service knew. She told him that before the war, she had been sent to Earth on a cultural observation mission. She told him she had lived among humans in disguise, using Valerian biotechnology to alter her appearance completely. She told him she had lived on the coast of Oregon for 1 year. Cole went still. She told him the name she had used during her time on Earth. She said, "My name was Lena." The garden seemed to hold its breath. The flowers stopped moving. The soft hum of bioluminescence went silent, as if the living things around them understood that this moment was too heavy for light. Cole did not move. He stood like a man who had been turned to stone. His face was blank, but his eyes were alive with something violent and raw, a storm building behind glass. Aelith kept going. She told him everything. The disguise, the mission, the recall order that came at 3 a.m. when the Cathari swarm first attacked. She told him about the protocol that demanded she leave no trace. She told him she had begged her father's advisors for time, for permission to say goodbye, and had been denied. She told him she had stood over him while he slept, wanting to wake him, wanting to tell him the truth, and had walked out the door because she believed she had no choice. She told him she had carried the guilt for 10 years. She told him she had never forgiven herself. She told him that not a single day had passed without her thinking about him, about that apartment, about the sound of rain on the windows, and the way his hands felt when they held hers. She told him she was sorry, not as a princess, not as a representative of the Valerian Dominion, as the woman who loved him in a small apartment by the sea and was too afraid to fight for it. Cole spoke. His voice was low and rough, like gravel scraping against stone. He told her that after she vanished, he lost his mind. He filed missing person reports. He called every hospital in the state. He drove up and down the coast for weeks, barely eating, barely sleeping, stopping at every town to show her picture and ask if anyone had seen her. He contacted shelters, agencies, anyone who would listen. No one knew anything. There was no trail, no records. It was as if Lena had never existed. He told her the grief nearly killed him. He stopped working. He stopped caring. He drank until the edges of the world went soft and the mornings did not hurt so much. He sat in that empty apartment for months, waiting for her to walk through the door, and she never did. He told her the only thing that saved him was enlisting. The military gave him structure. It gave him orders to follow, and missions to complete, and people who depended on him. It gave him a reason to keep breathing. And when the swarms started killing, and the call went out for volunteers to fight on the front lines, he stepped forward without hesitation. Not because he was brave, because he did not care if he lived or died, and that made him dangerous. He told her that somewhere along the way, the not caring turned into something else. He started fighting for the people around him, for the soldiers beside him, for the Valaran civilians who screamed and ran and bled and reminded him that life was precious even when his own felt worthless. He fought because they needed him, and being needed was the only thing that kept the emptiness at bay. He told her that every mission he took, every impossible battle he walked into, part of him was still looking for her, still trying to prove something, still trying to fill the hole she left. He was not shouting. He was not crying. He was speaking with the terrible, controlled calm of a man who had kept a wound sealed for so long that opening it felt like surgery without anesthesia. Aelith did not defend herself. She did not argue. She did not explain. She stood in front of him and took every word because she owed him that much. When he finished, the garden around them was dark. The flowers had gone to deep shades of violet and gray, as if the plants themselves were mourning. Cole asked her one question. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you love me, or was I part of the mission?" Aelith did something then that no Valaran royal had done in the presence of an outsider in centuries. She dropped her telepathic shields. Not partially, not carefully, completely. Every wall, every barrier, every layer of mental protection she had built over a lifetime, gone in an instant. It was the most vulnerable thing a Valaran could do. The equivalent of tearing open her chest and letting someone see every thought, every feeling, every hidden truth. Cole was not telepathic. He could not read her mind, but he could feel it. A wave of emotion hit him like a physical force. Warmth, grief, love. Not the polite, distant kind of love that fades with time, but the deep, stubborn, impossible kind that survives years of separation and war and silence. He could feel how much she had missed him. He could feel how many nights she had lain awake, thinking about him. He could feel the truth of it in his bones. She said, "You were never part of the mission. You were the reason I almost did not come back." Cole turned away. He walked to the edge of the garden and stood with his back to her, looking out at the alien sky. The twin moons of Valara Prime hung low on the horizon, pale and silent. He stayed like that for a long time. When he turned back, his eyes were red but dry. His jaw was tight. His hands were steady. He said he did not know if he could forgive her. He said he did not know if what they once had could exist again after everything that had happened. Too much time. Too much pain. Too much war. He said he needed time. Aelith nodded. She told him she would not ask for anything he was not willing to give. She told him the truth was his now, and whatever he did with it was his right. Cole walked out of the garden without looking back. That night in his guest quarters, Cole sat on the edge of his bed in the dark. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. The edges were soft from years of handling. The image was faded but clear enough. A dark-haired woman, standing on an Oregon beach, smiling in the rain. Her face turned slightly toward the camera, as if someone she loved had just called her name. He had carried that picture through every battle, through every burning colony, and every cold night in the trenches, and every moment when the universe felt like nothing but darkness and noise. He had held it in his hands when he thought he was going to die, and it had been the last thing he wanted to see. He looked at the picture for a long time, then he looked up at the alien ceiling, at the strange light of a world that was not his, and thought about a woman with silver skin and violet eyes who had just shown him, without words, that her heart had been breaking as long as his. Across the palace, Aelith stood at her window. She stared at a holographic star map floating above her desk. Earth was there, a tiny blue dot on the galactic fringe, barely visible among the billions of other stars. Such a small, quiet world. Such an enormous thing it had given her. She pressed her fingers against the glass and closed her eyes. The garden flowers below her window had turned a color that had no name in any human language. Something between silver and violet and the deep aching blue of a sky just before dawn. The Velarin called it the color of love that waits. Part 5. What remains when the war is over? 3 days passed. Cole and Aelith did not speak privately. The diplomatic work continued, meetings and documents and handshakes, and all the slow, careful business of turning a wartime alliance into something permanent. Cole showed up to every event. He was polite, composed, professional. He said the right things and smiled at the right moments, and gave no sign that anything had changed. But the people who knew him could see it. Nora Beckett saw it. She had served beside Cole for 5 years. She had watched him lead men and women into hell and bring them back alive. She knew every version of him. The calm commander, the furious fighter, the quiet man who stared at the stars when he thought no one was watching. She knew something had happened. She asked him once, carefully, over a cup of the bitter Velarin tea that they had both grown to tolerate. He said nothing. He shook his head and looked away. Nora did not ask again. She had learned a long time ago that Cole carried things alone, and pushing him only made him close up tighter. Emperor Korath saw it too, though he was watching from the other side. His daughter had become a ghost. She moved through her duties with mechanical precision, speaking when spoken to, smiling when required, but the light behind her eyes had gone out. Korath was old and wise, and had ruled an empire through its darkest hour. He knew the look of someone fighting a war inside themselves. He did not press Aelith for an explanation. He simply watched and waited, and hoped his daughter would find her way through whatever storm she was caught in. Lord Syrath was less patient. The chief advisor had pieced together fragments of the truth through palace intelligence, overheard conversations, security reports of the princess and the human commander spending time alone. He did not know the full story, but he knew enough to be alarmed. He approached Aelith in her private study, and told her in his cold, precise voice that any personal entanglement with the human could destabilize the treaty and compromise her standing as heir to the Dominion. He suggested that Commander Hartley be reassigned back to human space ahead of schedule, and the matter quietly buried. Aelith looked at him. For the first time in her life, she spoke to her chief advisor with the kind of cold, quiet fury that her father was known for. She told Syrath that if he made any attempt to interfere with her personal affairs, she would remove him from the court. Not quietly, not diplomatically. She would strip his titles, his position, and his access to the palace, and she would do it publicly. Syrath left without another word. He had served the Velarin court for 40 years. He had never seen that look in the princess before. It was the same look her father wore when he declared war on the swarm. Cole walked the halls at night. Aelith stared at star maps in the dark. The treaty negotiations moved forward without them, carried by diplomats and lawyers who did not need a war hero or a princess to argue over trade agreements and border protocols. Then, on the 4th day, everything changed. A distress signal came in from a Velarin outpost on the edge of the system. A remnant Cathari raiding force, a splinter group that had not retreated with the main swarm, had attacked without warning. The outpost was lightly defended. There were 300 civilians sheltering there, mostly families who had been evacuated from border colonies during the war, and had not yet been relocated. The Velarin fleet scrambled to respond, but their nearest ships were hours away. The outpost shields would not hold that long. Cole heard the alert and was moving before anyone asked him. He contacted the Steadfast, which was still docked at the orbital station. He spoke to Nora Beckett and gave her 3 words: gear up, now. The Velarin military command was stunned when they received his offer. Commander Hartley was a guest, a dignitary. He had no obligation to fight. The war was over. This was a cleanup operation, dangerous and thankless, the kind of mission that nobody volunteered for. Cole did not care about obligations. 300 people were going to die if someone did not get there in time. He had a ship and a crew, and that was all he needed. Aelith was in the command center when Cole's ship launched. She watched the Steadfast break from the orbital station and burn hard toward the edge of the system. She watched the tactical display as his ship, a single human frigate, raced toward a fight it had no reason to be part of. She watched him fly toward danger, the way he always did, without hesitation, without drama, without asking for anything in return. Just a man who saw people in trouble and moved to help because that was who he was. Before the war, before the military, before the heartbreak. This was who Cole Hartley had always been. It was why she had fallen in love with him on a rainy coast in Oregon. It was why a princess of the Valeran Dominion had sat on a kitchen counter in a small apartment and thought, "This is where I belong." The battle at the outpost was short and brutal. The Ketheri raiders were a small force, desperate and aggressive, hitting the outpost shields with everything they had. Cole arrived just as the shields began to fail. He coordinated the defense with Valeran patrol ships that were already in the area, forming a combined battle line that caught the raiders in a crossfire. Human and Valeran ships fought side by side, following Cole's commands, and within 2 hours, the raiding force was destroyed. 11 Valeran soldiers and 2 human crew members died in the engagement. Cole took a direct hit to the Steadfast's bridge during the final push, and a piece of shrapnel tore a deep gash across his left arm. It was not life-threatening, but it bled heavily, and the Valeran healers insisted on treating him properly when he returned to Valara Prime. He was brought to the medical wing of the palace. Aelith did not wait for permission. She did not send a messenger or check with protocol officers. She walked into the medical wing, past the guards, past the healers, and sat down in the chair beside his bed. Cole was sitting up. His left arm was being treated by a Valeran healer, a gentle process that involved bioluminescent gel and a soft hum of energy that knitted tissue back together. He looked tired. His gray eyes were heavy with the particular exhaustion of a man who had just fought a battle he thought he was done fighting. He looked at Aelith. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Cole said, "You could have told me, you know. Back then, I would have understood." Aelith said, "I was afraid you would try to come with me, and where I was going, I could not protect you." Cole let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. I ended up there anyway. It was such a simple, devastating truth that the room went quiet. Even the healer paused for a moment before continuing. Then Cole reached out with his good hand and took hers. It was the first real contact between them since the formal handshake at the ceremony. His hand was rough and scarred, calloused from years of gripping weapons and tools and the edges of burning wreckage. Her hand was smooth and silver, cool to the touch, with long fingers that had never held anything heavier than a data tablet. They did not match. They did not need to. He said he had spent the last 3 days thinking about everything, about Oregon, about the war, about who they were before and who they had become. He said the people they used to be were gone. That version of their story was over. The mechanic and the woman named Lena, they did not exist anymore. But he said he did not want to walk away from what they could be, if she was willing to try, if they were both brave enough to build something new on top of everything that had broken. Aelith tightened her fingers around his. She said she had spent 10 years being brave for her people, for her father, for the Dominion. She said she would like the chance to be brave for herself. Cole smiled. It was small, tired, and imperfect, but it was real. The first real smile she had seen from him since the ceremony. It was the same smile she remembered from a kitchen in Oregon, and it broke her heart and healed it at the same time. The treaty was signed the following week. It was the most significant diplomatic agreement in a generation. It established permanent cooperation between the Valaran Dominion and Earth's United Territorial Command. Trade routes, cultural exchanges, joint military operations, scientific partnerships, and a permanent human embassy on Valara Prime, the first alien world to host such an institution. Cole was offered the position of military attaché to the new embassy. It was a diplomatic role, not a combat assignment. It would keep him on Valara Prime in an official capacity, as a representative of humanity, close enough to the palace to be part of the new world they were building. He accepted. Nora Beckett told him he was making a mistake. She told him he was a soldier, not a diplomat, and that staying on an alien world for personal reasons was going to complicate his career and his life in ways he could not predict. Cole told her she was probably right. Then he told her he had spent a decade making decisions based on what made sense, and every one of those decisions had led him through fire and blood and loss. He said he was going to try making one decision based on something else. Nora shook her head, but she was smiling when she did it. The final night before the delegations departed and the embassy officially opened, Aelith found Cole on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. The sky above Valara Prime was violet and gold, streaked with the light of 100 distant stars. The twin moons hung low, casting silver shadows across the towers and the bridges and the gardens below. She stood beside him. They did not speak for a while. They just watched the sky together, the way they used to watch the ocean from the window of a small apartment in Oregon. Cole said, "I kept your picture, the one from the beach." Aelith looked at him. "That woman does not exist anymore." Cole turned to face her. He looked at the silver skin, the violet eyes, the white hair that caught the moonlight like threads of spun glass. He looked at the alien princess who was also the woman who had changed his life in a small town on the edge of the world. The woman he had searched for, grieved for, and gone to war carrying the ghost of. He said, "Yes, she does." Aelith felt something inside her shift, something that had been frozen for 10 years, locked away behind duty and guilt and the cold mathematics of royal obligation. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was quiet and warm and steady, like the first sunlight after a long winter. She leaned against him, her shoulder touching his. He put his arm around her. They stood like that on the balcony, an alien princess and a human soldier, two people who had been broken by time and distance and war, who had found each other again against every possible odd, and who had chosen, despite everything, to try again. Below them, in the memorial garden, the bioluminescent flowers were blooming. They had been silver and violet and dark blue for months, mourning the dead, grieving for what was lost. Tonight, they were gold. In Valaran tradition, gold was the rarest color the flowers could show. It did not bloom for happiness alone. It did not bloom for victory or relief or celebration. It bloomed for only one thing. A love returned. The flowers glowed softly in the night, and the light reached all the way up to the balcony where two people stood together under alien stars, holding on to each other and to the strange, stubborn, beautiful hope that the universe, after everything, still had room for second chances. The alien princess realizes the warrior who won the war is her lost first love. Part 1. The War That Shook the Stars. The war had been going on for 9 years. 9 long, bloody years that had broken the back of the Valaran Dominion, an alien empire that once ruled 3 star systems with pride and grace. Their enemy was the Kethari Swarm, a hive-minded race of insectoid creatures that ate entire worlds. They consumed everything, Cities, forests, oceans, people. Nothing was left behind when the swarm moved through a planet. Just dust and silence. Princess Aelith Sorvani had watched the war from Valara Prime, the throne world of her people. She was the daughter of Emperor Korath Sorvani, and her duty was to oversee the refugee camps, the supply chains, the endless lists of the dead and the displaced. She was good at her work. She was calm, organized, and compassionate. But behind her steady violet eyes, there was a sadness that had nothing to do with the war. Years before the swarm had ever attacked, before the first Valaran colony had burned, Aelith had been sent to Earth. It was a diplomatic mission, a quiet cultural observation of the young species called humans. Earth was a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. Most alien civilizations thought of humans the way one might think of children playing in the mud. Curious, primitive, not worth much attention. Aelith had gone to Earth in disguise. Valaran biotechnology had changed her appearance completely. Instead of silver skin and white hair and glowing violet eyes, she had looked human. Dark hair, brown eyes, freckles across her nose from the Oregon sun. She had called herself Lena. She had rented a small apartment above a boat repair shop in a coastal town, and she had lived among the humans for a year. That was where she met Cole Hartley. He fixed boats and old cars and anything else people brought to his shop. He was tall and quiet, with gray eyes and rough hands, and a gentle way of speaking that made Aelith feel safe in a way she had never felt on Valara Prime. He did not know she was an alien. He did not know she was a princess. He knew her as Lena, the woman who liked to walk on the beach in the rain and who asked too many questions about how engines worked. They fell in love slowly and simply. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just two people who found each other and fit together like they had been waiting their whole lives for exactly this. Cole would cook dinner, while Aelith sat on the kitchen counter and told him about the stars, speaking carefully so she would not say too much. He would laugh and say she should have been a scientist. She would smile and think, if only you knew. It was the happiest year of her life. Then the Kethari swarm attacked the outer colonies of the Valaran Dominion, and everything ended. Aelith received the recall order at 3 a.m, a coded transmission, urgent and absolute. She was to return to Valara Prime immediately. She was to leave no trace of her identity, no evidence, no contact information, no goodbye. She stood in the dark bedroom and looked at Cole sleeping. He was on his side, one arm stretched out toward the space where she usually lay. His face was peaceful. His breathing was slow and steady. She wanted to wake him. She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to beg him to understand. But she could not. Royal protocol was clear. The mission was classified. Earth was not ready to know about the wider galaxy, and Cole was not ready to know what she really was. If she told him the truth, if she stayed, her people would face the swarm without their princess. So Aelith packed a small bag, erased every trace of the technology she had brought with her, and walked out of the apartment without making a sound. She did not leave a note. She did not look back. She climbed into a shuttle hidden in the forest outside of town, and left Earth's atmosphere before the sun came up. She told herself it was the right thing to do. She told herself Cole would move on. He was human. Humans were adaptable. They forgot, they healed. He would find someone else, someone real, someone who could stay. She told herself these things for 9 years, and she never once believed them. The war grew worse with every passing season. The Kethari swarm pushed deeper into Valaran territory. Colony after colony fell. The Dominion's fleets, once the finest in the region, were being torn apart. Allies turned their backs. The galactic community watched and did nothing. Everyone assumed the Valaran would fall. It was only a matter of time. Then the humans came. No one had asked them to. No treaty bound them to the Valaran cause. But the swarm had made the mistake of raiding a human colony on the edge of shared space, killing 6,000 civilians in a single night. Earth's response was immediate and terrifying. The United Territorial Command, humanity's combined military force, launched a full mobilization. Within months, human warships began appearing on the front lines. They were not elegant ships. They were not advanced by galactic standards. They were loud, crude, heavily armored, and packed with weapons that prioritized damage over precision. But they worked. The humans fought with a fury and a stubbornness that the swarm had never encountered. They did not retreat when they should have. They adapted in the middle of battle, changing tactics on the fly, improvising solutions that no military academy in the galaxy would have approved, and leading the most dangerous missions, pushing deeper into swarm territory than anyone had dared, was a human commander known only by his call sign, Grey Wolf. Nobody knew his real name. His identity was classified at the highest levels of human military command. But his record was impossible to ignore. He had led the breakthrough at the Siege of Nethara, a battle that had been considered unwinnable. He had destroyed a swarm hive carrier at the Battle of Crimson Drift, with a strategy so reckless that Valaran commanders had refused to believe the after-action report until they saw the footage. He had personally led ground operations that saved 2 Valaran colony worlds from total destruction, carrying wounded alien civilians on his back through burning streets, and no one knew who he was. Aelith heard the stories like everyone else. She admired the humans. She was grateful for their help. And sometimes, late at night, when the palace was quiet and the weight of the war pressed down on her, she thought about Cole. She wondered if he was safe. She wondered if Earth's entry into the war had touched his quiet life in that coastal town. She wondered if he still thought about her. She never imagined that the answers to those questions would walk through the doors of her father's throne room. The war ended on a Tuesday, as measured by Earth's calendar. The final Cathari offensive collapsed. The swarm retreated into deep space, broken and scattered. The galaxy exhaled. Emperor Korath Sorvani announced that the human commander known as Grey Wolf would be invited to Valara Prime for a formal ceremony of gratitude. It was the highest honor the Dominion could give. A recognition that without this one human, the Valaran people might not exist anymore. Aelith was instructed to oversee the ceremony personally. She accepted the duty without hesitation. It would be good, she thought, to focus on something meaningful, something that would keep her mind busy and her heart quiet. She had no idea what was coming.